In Latvia, usually when we think of Ukraine, of course, currently all our thoughts are with Ukrainian people who are suffering this terrible war. But in other times, we are thinking about Ukraine as a nation in transit, a nation that will once be European Union member state, and that probably is looking to European Union member states for advice on how to build its democracy. But on the other hand, when you are looking at realities on the ground and different successful stories of Ukrainians during recent decades, my impression is that it should be the other way around, that namely we here in European Union and different member states have much to learn from Ukraine, especially when it comes to civic engagement in decision-making, especially at subnational levels. There are many new methods which we are currently discussing in Latvia that have been in place in Ukraine for quite a long time. So that's the main purpose of this event, which is organized as one of the opening events of the so-called Civic Engagement Week. And we have two excellent, maybe the best experts on these subject matters. And let me introduce you with those experts. Oleksii Kolesnikov, he is currently near Chernivtsi in Ukraine, and he is the head of Association for Community Self-Organization Assistance. And he was basically prepared to talk about all kinds of issues related to civic engagement at subnational level. But then we decided that it's probably most useful for Latvia would be a focus on e-democracy, because Ukraine, unlike Latvia, has plenty of experience with e-democracy at the local level, while we here in Latvia, basically, when we are thinking about e-democracy, we are only thinking about national level. So there probably are some lessons for Latvia as well. And I would ask Oleksii Kolesnikov to tell us what you feel is the most important things about e-democracy in Ukraine at the subnational level. So floor is yours, Oleksii.
Thanks, Iveta, for introduction. Hope everyone hears me well. So I will share the screen because I have a small presentation with some numbers which might be interesting for our audience. So just a moment. So I will try to focus on e-democracy tools, not all of them, but mostly two, e-petitioning and participatory budgeting. I will explain why, but actually the first remark I would like to make is that over the last 7 years, so starting actually from 2015, perhaps, Ukraine has passed very intensive development of e-democracy and e-governance in our country. And in regard of e-democracy, I can say we have passed away from no e-democracy, almost no e-democracy before 2015, let's be true, to quite intensively developing tools which are actively used by citizens now. No, of course, not now, probably not in this, not under these circumstances, but before the war, they were still very, very demanded in our society. But first of all, I would like to outline a bit the context which facilitated such rapid development of e-democracy in our country, and there were some number of factors which altogether created this context which was quite favorable for e-democracy development. So first of all, it was probably decentralization, which started from the end of 2014, but actively it started in 2015. And of course, this reform, which is considered one of the most successful ones in our recent history, it established new environment for civic engagement at the local level, because more authority and more resources went to the local level, and of course it created conditions for more active civic engagement at the local level. The second one is active digitalization. I can't say that we were somewhere very far from European countries in sense of digitalization, but over the last years it was really very rapid. Because frankly speaking, at the beginning of 2015, we didn't have even 3G and internet in our country. But when our closest European neighbors, Poland, maybe Latvia too, had 4G at this time already, so we needed to follow very quickly, and we managed with this. So various digitalization processes were going very rapidly over this period. So more and more territories were covered by internet. We received mobile internet, we received bank ID, modern and aligned fully with the European standards legislation on electronic signatures and so on and so forth. So this process is also contributed to the development of democracy in our country. Of course, DCFTA, which was signed and came in force, association agreement with the European Union, and a number of our obligations, both regarding rule of law and democracy, and at the same time on digitalization and digital market integration with the digital market. So this document for sure contributed to the development, indirectly contributed to the development of e-democracy in our country. One more factor was various donors' activities and free IT solutions, because actually starting from 2015, we received many technical assistance projects and many donors who supported e-democracy projects. Inter alia, they helped to create various free IT solutions when local councils and other authorities didn't need to develop something themselves and waste a lot of money. They just were able to join already complete solution and use it for these purposes. And it was a good initiative which helped to develop democracy in Ukraine very, very quickly. Of course, we had some negative factors, and one of them is digital divide and lack of civic culture, which we actually face still today. Because in Ukraine we have still quite a big divide between rural and urban areas, though it becomes smaller and smaller from year to year, but still we have it. And it's not only about infrastructure, but also about skills, so digital skills of people in rural area and in urban area. We had legal gaps which generally didn't enhance civic participation. What I mean in this regard, actually we have the model which works in many European countries, but it's not enough operational in Ukraine. When civic engagement is the right but not an obligation of local authorities. So they can engage, but everything depends on them actually, and on demand of the people. But our civil society is struggling for more obligations in this regard established by law, when local authorities will have to engage people more on their initiative. And finally, of course, high demand on various reforms after the revolution of dignity, on everything new. So everything new and innovative was perceived very optimistically in the society, and that's why such tools as e-petitions or participatory budgets, which we never had before. They were perceived very good as well, and people were very interested in using these tools, new tools, which they didn't face previously. So that's all about the context. And I would like to, previously I planned to focus on three actually tools, e-petitions, e-consultations, and participatory budgeting, but going deeper in the topic, I understood that e-consultations is currently not a sphere where we have something to share, so we are only on the beginning of this way, at least at the local level. And plus, there were no serious deep researchers in this area, and currently operating services, IT online services for consultations, unfortunately, are switched off, and it's difficult to get any data. So I think that in the area of e-consultations, we do not have some positive experience to share, but I think we have it in e-petitioning and participatory budgeting. So we'll start from e-petitions. So e-petitions were introduced in Ukraine in 2015 and very quickly became popular. The general legal framework is established by national legislation, so our specific is that they are regulated both by national legislation, but only framework, general framework. And it's not legislation on local governance, it's legislation on citizens' appeals. As well, while the procedures are regulated through bylaw, in case of central authorities, and local legal acts in case of local councils. So at the local level, the pioneers were Vinnytsia, Kyiv, Lutsk, Ternopil, and Chernivtsi. So these were the first cities who introduced them. And one very more specific thing that in Ukraine, we have only e-petitions and we do not have a paper petition. So our legislation doesn't provide for such tool. So petitions are electronic only in our country. How does it work in our country? So they can be addressed to four authorities, actually, types of authorities: president, parliament, government, and local self-government bodies. Any citizen, even not Ukrainian, can initiate the petition according to the law. Yeah, but actually, in practice, it doesn't work like this in all cases, because local councils can establish the authentication systems, so mechanism. And if they decide that it is bank ID or e-signature, then actually foreigners will not be allowed, and even people not living in this or those city will not be allowed to sign it. So it's a bit against the law, it breaks the law, but in many cases it works like this. Yeah, so it depends on what authentication system is used. Soft one, when you use just email and phone, and then everyone can use this tool, or it is hard authentication with e-signature, bank ID, mobile ID, etc. Actually, procedure is very simple. So it is initiated, checked for compliance with the legislations, and published. And then, if everything is okay, then a petition should gather established number of signatures, established by local council. So each council establishes its own barrier for signatures and for time for collection. And it can vary, actually. And what's important, I have said about this, that there are different free petitioning platforms and services available, which can be joined by municipalities and used for free. Yeah, so they do not need their own IT solutions. I would like to say that we have conducted very big research, our organization, in 2018 at the end, and we covered actually the biggest platform, free platform, which is called Unified System for Local Petitions, created by the support of Switzerland. and it is the most popular platform till today. So I can show some figures from this research, but now they are higher. Actually, currently it's not operational; it's switched off. But I know that currently it is used by almost 300 municipalities have joined this platform. So at that time, when we made this research, 138 municipalities were using the system. And there were initiated through the system over 12,000 petitions, which was averagely 13 petitions per 10,000 residents, and I find it quite high. Quite high indicator. Signatures varied, barriers varied from 20 to 1,000. Actually, it works for all Ukraine, but only Kyiv has much higher barrier, 10,000 signatures. And time barriers from 14 to 90 days. So at this time, at the end of 2018, almost 1.5 million people signed different petitions through the system. And the average share of successful petitions, I mean those which gathered signatures and were considered by the councils, was about 18%, which is quite high. I think too. Yeah, so every fifth petition actually goes for consideration. Factors of success, what helped to make petitions so popular in our country. So they work with various successfulness in various municipalities. So it depends every time, but when it works successful, usually it's because of, first of all, adequate barriers. We can't say that this barrier is adequate and it's universal formula. Yeah, so every time it depends, because for instance, 14 days barrier for time for gathering signatures works perfectly in Vinnytsia. It doesn't work in Uzhgorod at all. Yeah, while Vinnytsia is much more bigger city, 3 times bigger than Uzhgorod. So it always depends, but it's better to start from small barriers. So it's better to start from small, and if you see that there are too many petition spam, then it can be raised. Yeah, so but not starting from high barriers. It was a bad option. The second one, simple user authentication and submission procedures. So as simple as they are, as active citizens are initiating petitions. So some cities went through first simple authentication, but when there were too much petitions, they introduced bank ID, so more complicated systems, and petitioning became less active, but still it operates. Yeah. Active promotion, it helps when councils promote the tool. So they promote it via various channels and communicate it. Proper consideration of successful petitions and their implementation if supported. So we have found many cases when petitions are considered and implemented properly, yeah, then people see the result, and then they are more actively initiating and signing. But when they are not considered, the tool might die at all, yeah, and might not be used. And finally, convenient solutions, including free ones. So if we had now these solutions, probably not so many municipalities will be ready to use this petitioning mechanism. And finally, lessons learned from this Ukrainian experience of local e-petitioning. So actually, the trend is almost in all cities the same. So after the introduction, usually there comes a petition boom that falls over time. However, when the petitioning leads to the first clear results, the interest to the still raises again. So it goes like first higher, then lower, and then on the middle, and then it operates in a proper manner. Yeah, there is too much petitioning spam. That's true. Yeah, in our country. So various petitions, stupid, trolling, and so on and so forth. And of course, countermeasures are strongly encouraged. However, these countermeasures should not stifle the citizens' initiative. And here comes the third lesson, and very important one, that we should perceive petitions properly. They are not a tool for decision making, and should not be treated like this. This is the tool for agenda setting. Yeah. So, and if we treat them like this, so we then understand their proper role in governance system. What should be improved in our legislation, that actually we do not have legal mechanisms for petitions implementation. So our legislation finishes on their consideration. And what's going on further? Yeah, so here every local authority decides on its own, and we have some kind of mess there. Yeah, and of course, in our country, as for our country, petitions are currently rather urban tools than rural ones. So usually it doesn't work properly in the rural area, and is mostly for urban communities, and mostly works in big cities. Regarding budgeting, so very specific, our model is that it is established only by local decisions, and there is no regulation at all at national level. So we do not have even term participatory budgeting in Ukrainian legislation. The pioneers at local level were Cherkasy, Poltava, and Chernihiv. And it was probably the most dynamically developing tool, and now is introduced in about 200 municipalities of Ukraine, including both rural ones and urban ones. And if compared with petitions, participatory budgeting can work well and very efficient in rural communities too. And we see the cases showing this. In our country, rules in each case are established by local councils only, and funding is provided through local target programs usually. There are no sustainable models, and local communities continue experimenting and changing the rules every cycle, every year. So we do not have something sustainable, and models vary from city to city, from community to community. Usually there is allocated 1% of the special revenue funds, but actually it can be higher. And only in Kyiv it's a bit lower, but Kyiv has a big budget. Projects are usually categorized, so different types are used. I will return to this, and pass as expertise before being registered. And regarding initiative, usually citizens older than 18 are eligible for participation in participatory budgeting, but in some cases we have today 14 and 16, so young people can apply to these projects, and actually it works in many cases. In many cases it works, and it shows good results. People usually have several votes, but it depends. It might be 3, 5, 10, depends. And voting system usually combines e-voting and paper voting, but in some cases only e-voting is available. But e-voting is available only voting is used only in Kyiv, in Odesa, for instance, so in big cities. But in smaller communities, it is better to use both e-voting and paper voting, then it works better. And sorry, I'm taking a bit more time, but just few minutes to finish. At the end of 2020, our organization completed big research of participatory budgeting in 37 biggest Ukrainian cities. We mean all cities with population 100,000 plus. Yeah, so we covered all the cities, and we covered the period from 2015 to 2019, so 5 years, and studied how participatory budgeting worked in these communities at this time. Actually, at this time, 35 cities have introduced participatory budgeting. 2 haven't introduced, but Pavlograd was introduced in 2020, and only Lysychansk remains the one city without participatory budgeting at this time. In these cities, over 5 years, they were initiated totally over 16,000 projects, and their number tended to increase from year by year. So always had the trend to increase. Averagely, it was 5-7 projects per 10,000 residents. So it's a good result. Yeah, in some cases it was lower, but it was a good result for many cities. And I think that it shows actually that the tool was rather demanded. One more important thing, that the number of votes was also, and people voting was gradually growing from year to year. So more and more and more people were engaged in these processes. And that's a good result. And for instance, we had counted votes per capita, and the highest rate was in Kryvyi Rih, where in one cycle 353 votes were per 10,000 residents. So it's quite high result, I guess. And totally they were supported, so successful were 3,877 projects which were supported and financed. Averagely, more than fifths of initiated projects were successful, which is also a very good indicator, I think. 3 main spheres of these projects, successful projects, were education, it's the sphere number 1, territorial improvement, and physical culture and sports. And totally over 1.7 billion hryvnias, which is equivalent to about 500 million euro, has been allocated to these projects in 35 municipalities, so through participatory budgeting mechanism. And just finishing factors of success, what was important? So substantial and gradually growing budgets which were allocated. So it was we saw very clear interdependence, that in those communities where more and more money were allocated from year by year, more and more people were engaged. Yeah. Well-organized procedures, and very important, primarily driven by local civil society leaders, not officials. So we see that this civic model of participatory budgeting, Kyiv is probably one of the most prominent examples, where this process is not driven by officials at all. So there is a commission consisting of civil society leaders, and they drive the process. So it works much better in this regard. So what was also so important, regular competitions, because there were cities which conducted competition 1 year and missed it next year, and then conducted once more. So when they're not regular, people lose interest to this. Or many of them stopped the competitions because of COVID, and it was a negative factor, negatively influencing on the development of participatory budgeting in 2020. Good project expertise. It's very important because we have some examples when projects were selected, they were supported, but not implemented because they cannot be implemented. Yeah? Because at the final stage, it occurred that the land where it should be implemented doesn't belong to the city, yeah? Or something like this, or the budget is too low, or something like this. So that's why this good project expertise at the beginning is very, very important. Training of citizens to prepare the projects, very important thing. People should be trained, yeah, how to write them, because mostly they're not ready. They do not have project experience. And of course, like with petitions, proper implementation and communication of results, yeah, it's a factor of success, and convenient IT solutions. And some very important lessons learned. So if talking about Ukraine, we can say that national regulation would make rather harm than help. Yeah, because there were attempts to introduce participatory budgeting into national legislation, but we find it a very bad idea and tried to avoid these attempts. And finally, we see that it works without national regulation, and it's perfect, yeah, currently, at the moment. Very important to divide projects into small ones and big ones, or there is new more approach hard and soft, so infrastructure projects and activity projects. But this split is very important because usually activity projects cannot be concurrents to infrastructure projects. People prefer infrastructure. It's important to make shares. So this share is spent to big infrastructure projects and this one to small activity projects. Officials should be engaged in the process as less as possible. So at the final stage when they should be implemented. The rules should be designed to make projects create something unique and innovative and their results available to everybody. What do I mean in this regard? Too many projects are implemented. For instance, there is created a new gym at school, yeah, at school, or something new which can be used only for a limited number of people, of residents. And I think that if talking about the results for everybody, yeah, so the participatory budgeting should be oriented on the results which create something really new in the community and is available to everyone. Yeah, two last things. It is very important to train people to write projects and to provide expertise before voting. I have said this. And the project's results should be communicated better because we see that most of communities do not communicate them at all. So they just implement it and forgot about this. But this communication of results might engage more and more people in the future. And that's why this communication is crucial, you know, for this fund. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking a bit more time.
Thank you, Oleksii. I think it was a wonderful presentation, lots of interesting observations, and also I have a series of questions. But my maybe general remark would be that in Latvia we are somehow going in the opposite direction. We see that in Ukraine municipalities get quite a lot of discretion. They'll make their own rules regarding e-petition, signature limits, or participatory budgeting. Latvia, for one reason or another, and we might discuss the differences a bit later, is going in a different direction. Namely, we are regulating this via national law, and then municipalities might have some discretion, but not regarding big things. So that's so interesting to learn about your experience. And I'll start with my questions regarding e-petitioning mechanism. So first of all, you said that there is quite a lot of success for people who are submitting their petitions. There's something around 18% or something like that, which is a lot. But my question to you is, how do you know? How do you know if a petition has been successful or not? Should the municipalities publish some report, or there is specific research where you are asking the petitioners themselves whether they are satisfied?
Oh, yeah, sorry. In this regard, a successful petition doesn't mean that it was implemented. It means that it was supported and considered. It came to the we actually we have to read our two, but we will continue. Don't worry about this. Successful petition, I mean, in this regard, I mean this which has managed to collect enough signatures and was considered by the council. Yeah, so I mean successful. Of course, those which were implemented, the percentage is much lower. So it might be 1%. Yeah, because there are many petitions which are considered, but they cannot be implemented. Actually, it's just impossible.
But then it's interesting. Why would the rest of petitions not be even considered? It's because they are spam, or is there some I don't know?
No, they didn't collect enough signatures. That's why this problem is not so important for many people. So number of signatures shows that there are many people disturbed by this or those issue. So if they do not collect the established number, which can vary from 20 to 1,000, yeah, for big cities, for instance, Odesa has 1,000. So if they are collected, then it shows to the council, yeah, that people are disturbed by this problem, and it is important. And then it goes to the council. But all the other petitions still are considered, but in another, according to another procedures, as a citizens' appeal. So they're not rejected completely, but they are not considered by the council automatically. Yeah, that's what important. So if the petition collects enough signatures, it goes to the council directly in most cases.
Okay, so basically those 18% are probably those initiatives who have met these technical requirements.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I see. And then let's imagine we're talking only about those petitions that have met these technical requirements. What are municipal obligations towards the petitioners? So they have to probably consider what's there, and then from what you said, I understand they are not, of course, obliged to implement those ideas because it's at their discretion. But nevertheless, they can refuse it, they can accept it. Do you have at least some understanding of whether usually such kinds of petitions are successful, or it's a rare case? You said that around 1% may be successful in this sense.
The question is fully clear, and I've got an answer. Actually, this is a gap in our legislation, that we do not have even framework rules for such cases. Yeah, so because our legislation finishes when the petition is considered. Yeah, so that it should be considered by the local authority. And this is the gap, but some local authorities, and Kyiv was the first one, managed to prescribe this procedure further in local regulation. So in local regulation, they have established the rules, what should be done further if the petition is supported by the council. Yeah. And some councils followed this rule, and this procedure too have taken to their regulations, and it works actually. And for instance, our organization is advocating this amendment to the law, that this procedure should be established in the legislation too. But actually, yes, there are many cases when petitions are supported but not implemented. On the other hand, we have lots of good cases, success stories, when petitions have real changes in the life of relevant local communities. Yeah. So, and they are really implemented in this regard. But this procedure, unfortunately, it's a gap of our legislation, which can be filled by local regulation, but not all local authorities do it actually properly.
But my overall impression was that this is quite a popular way how people communicate with the local government in Ukraine.
Yeah, in many cases, yeah, because actually, when we started this research, such cities like Chernivtsi, Chernihiv, Sumy, they received 200, 300 petitions per month.
Oh, I see.
Initiated. About several dozens of them were successful and were considered. Yeah, but of course there is a lot of spam. I know a very specific example. I always try to show on this example. In Chernivtsi, there was a petition supported by people and considered by the council that deputies, members of this council, should pass through psychiatric expertise. Yeah, and they voted for this, that they will not pass it, but according to the law, they should consider, and they consider.
Okay, I see. Okay, we have one question from Slido, namely on, do you have some overview about the topics of those petitions? Are those usually some new ideas or suggestions to block something? Is it more about, I don't know, infrastructure, or it could be just anything?
Mostly it's infrastructure. Yes, we have studied, because we needed to categorize them ourselves, and that's why we read all to 12,000 actually, because different systems of categorization are used in different cities, and you cannot do it automatically in machinery way. So we needed to read them. So yes, mostly it's about infrastructure, education as well. Many petitions actually look like claims on some officials, on something like this. So when people cannot reach the results through regular appeals, they use petitions. Yeah, so engage support. And then it definitely goes to the council and at least is discussed among deputies and makes more resonance in this regard. So, but mostly it's about infrastructure, first of all.
Okay, so two more questions to you on participatory budgeting. One would be, it's a very interesting experience in Ukraine that despite the lack of national level regulation, you have municipalities who want to implement participatory budgeting, because in Latvia, this momentum didn't really happen. So we have had only 3 municipalities experimenting with participatory budgeting, but the rest are quite unwilling to join because they're saying, we have so little money, we have other purposes, why should we do that? It's complicated. So when the law will say that we must, and the law will do that in 2-3 years time, then yes, we are going to implement it. So how come that this idea started to be so popular in Ukraine?
I think that because the initiative came from the bottom, from the grassroots, and the idea of this budgeting, because actually in 2015 in Ukraine we had big financial decentralization, and local budgets grown very seriously, especially in big cities. So previously they paid more for central budget, transferred more, and now they received quite big budgets. In some cases they even didn't know what to do with these big budgets, which they received after many years of centralized budget system. And that's why they received these free funds, which could be used. And actually, the initiative came really from the bottom, from the civil society, and from the donor organization, because in our case, the first organization was international organization Policy, Ukrainian Poland organization, Ukrainian Polish organization, which was the pusher of the first participatory budgets in Ukraine and helped to establish them in Poltava. By the way, not Kiev was the first, actually, not the capital. So the first cities were Cherkasy, Poltava, and Chernihiv. So three cities which introduced it in 2015. So the first competitions were in 2015. So probably because not the authorities were the pushers, yeah, maybe because of this. And when it demonstrated that it works without national regulation, then because in particular me and Oleksii were both in some working groups in the parliament when there were attempts to introduce the term, the general rules into legislation, and we all tried, don't touch, so keep away from participatory budgeting. So we were trying to push this idea, because if it works like this, so don't touch it. If it doesn't work, yes, then you might need national regulation, but sorry. And it goes a lot of, it gives a lot of autonomy, yeah, how to organize the process, and it's good, I think, yeah, because local communities can decide on their own how to organize the process, because they have started one model, then have seen that it doesn't work, yeah, so we can change it. If we have national regulation, then it's much more difficult, yeah, to do this. That's probably the answer on this question.
Thank you. And my last question to you would be, from what I see, is that in Ukraine, you mentioned in context of best practice that the best practice consists in promoting different projects and also training the activists. Who is in charge of doing that typically in Ukraine? Would it be civic society organizations, or would it be the municipality itself?
Yeah, I haven't seen cases when it is organized by local authorities only, yeah, but jointly by civil society and authorities. Yes, such models we can see, and also some donor organizations as well support such schools of participatory budgeting, and there were schools conducted by the support of different donor organizations, but mostly they are driven by civil society institutions jointly with local authorities. So that's the most widespread model, I guess.
I promised that it was the last question, but nevertheless, one more. So returning back to e-petitions, in Latvian law that is currently being developed and that will be adopted in the beginning of September, probably, there is this follow-up mechanism that municipal institution has an obligation in 3 months' time after having received this, we call them collective e-submissions, e-petitions. It has a duty to make a report on what's going to happen next with this petition and present it in the council's sitting. Would you say that this kind of a mechanism is a good one? That namely, it's the council itself that needs to deliberate on what to do with this e-petition, write a report and make this report available publicly so that the citizens know whether their idea has or has not been taken into account and who is going to be in charge of implementing it.
I think that follow-up from the government is always a good idea, yeah, because it facilitates proper implementation, yeah. In Kiev, we, for instance, have the same situation, so there is usually, well, if the petition is supported, yeah, by the council, then by the same decision, there should be appointed a responsible person, official, yeah, usually it's deputy mayor, and he or she shall report once a quarter to the council and publish report how the petition is being implemented. and he stops doing it only after the petition is implemented completely. Yeah, okay. Completely realized. So I think it's quite working model. Yeah, because of course we cannot force implement any petition which was supported by people. Yeah, so there should be a filter of council. Yeah, because there are many stupid petitions which cannot be implemented. Yeah, but if it is supported by the council, then it should be realized. It should be implemented. Yeah. And these steps which you mentioned, they help to implement properly their own decisions, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. We still have more questions, but I think let's leave them.
Sorry, Oleksii, for taking more time.